Hello everyone, I'm Mike Connors, and welcome to How It Ticks, the go-to podcast for anyone with a spark of curiosity about the inner workings of Switzerland. Hosted by yours truly, an Australian expat with a deep curiosity, How It Ticks offers a platform where listeners are invited to explore the vast landscape of Swiss culture, business, innovation, and tradition. Each episode features a one-on-one interview with experts and thought leaders from various fields, providing a panoramic view of what makes Switzerland tick. If you are like me and you enjoy listening to successful people share their insights, this podcast is for you. My guest today is Alex Murray, a marketing strategist, researcher, and expert in personal branding. With a background spanning corporate marketing, academia, and startups, Alex has spent the last 2 decades helping individuals and businesses position themselves effectively in an evolving digital landscape. He teaches personal branding at the University of Zurich and Milan and advises professionals on how to stand out, build credibility, and future-proof their careers. What does it take to build a personal brand, and why does it matter? If you've been working in the same industry for years, how do you break out of whatever it is you are doing and redefine your professional identity? And does personal branding look different in Europe compared to the US, where self-promotion is more ingrained in the culture? In this episode, Alex and I explore the strategies behind building a personal brand, particularly for corporate professionals looking to pivot or expand their influence. We discuss the role of LinkedIn and how to brand yourself when you have multiple interests. We also dive into why so many people resist personal branding, the mistakes to avoid, and how job market trends are shaping how we present ourselves online. So if you've ever wondered how to craft a strong professional identity without feeling like you have to self-promote, this episode is for you. Now, here's my conversation with Alex Murray. How do you define a personal brand, and what are the defining characteristics of a successful one?
So, personal brand is about being radically authentic rather than pretending to be something you're not. And at the same time, you have to work in the name of a purpose rather than neglecting to discover your purpose. So inspiring others to follow your story is another key characteristic for personal branding. So contributing to something valuable to the world is also extremely important because oftentimes people are self-promoting without giving anything back. And so I think overall, a personal brand requires you to be intentional about your brand presence. So the biggest mistake that I see is that individuals are creating content without having a proper strategy. And so overall, I would define personal brand as your reputation that you build over time and requires, of course, a foundation of your values, your beliefs, but of course it evolves also with your interests and what you can actually give back to the world.
You said that it is not just self-promoting, but at the same time, self-promotion must be a big part of it, because if people don't know who you are, it doesn't matter what your brand is, right?
That's correct. Visibility is an important aspect of it. So there is, of course, an opportunity to differentiate yourself so that people can find you more easily. But at the same time, after they found you, you can stay top of mind, which means that a brand enables you to become more memorable. People can connect with you at any time. And because you are seen as a thought leader, a brand adds credibility and authority to your work. What I particularly like about a personal brand is the opportunity of connecting with like-minded individuals. So a brand supports the creation of relationships, so people can relate to you. And the consequence of all the hard work you do is that you attract more opportunity. So also financially, having a personal brand can be rewarding because your brand exposes your work to people that relate to it somehow. And so you can be hired more often. And therefore, by exposing your work, you will be developing your self-awareness in the sense that people will criticize you sometimes. And so in a way, you are receiving constant feedback that allows you to grow. So self-growth, another important aspect of it.
Mm. Is it more important today than it's ever been? Social media isn't new, and I guess I associate branding a lot with social media because that is just the channel in which we let people know what our brand is. But would you say now or the last few years it is becoming increasingly important, or it's always been important?
Well, I think based on the way I see personal branding, there is definitely, there has always been important in the sense that we need to develop self-awareness. So we need to explore personality traits, positive character traits, so our strength, our skills. Having a strong personal brand would have always helped, but through social media, your level of influence can be a lot broader. Building a personal brand today means that you are more easily able to navigate transitions from different jobs between industries and oftentimes also make lateral changes. So the idea is that with a lifelong personal brand, you're not investing simply to find a job and so opportunistically be more active online on social media just to land a position you like, but you are basically evolving and showing your evolution along the different jobs that you are doing. And so this is a sort of important aspect that stays with you over time. And so it is becoming, I believe, even more important.
Mm. Does anybody not need a personal brand? Is it only relevant for some career paths?
So I would say there are career paths that are that see personal brand being at the core, so require very strong commitment from the individual. There are others that instead can be considered just side activities. So I imagine two axes: one in terms of relevance, high, low, and in terms of commitment required, which is side activity or core activity. The high relevance, high commitment, I see a content creator influencer. So clearly, if your job is to be a content creator or influencer, you need to have a personal brand. You need to work on it very seriously. And then, of course, there are other jobs where it is slightly less relevant, slightly less commitment required. For example, a freelancer or a fractional worker. If you have a startup, if you are a founder, definitely it is important. But you go down to corporate employee and volunteers where this becomes optional. So again, the importance and the reason why you should have one are clear and are strategic. And definitely the career path that you choose can always evolve over time. And so your reliance on a personal brand might also change.
I would like to linger a little bit on the part of that graph which is optional. So that would be someone working a corporate job, because I would imagine quite a large percentage of the people listening to this would fit that category. So you say it's optional. What's a good reason or two to convince them that this is something worth investing their time in doing?
Yeah, so more and more senior managers, if you simply go on LinkedIn, you will realize are very actively creating a personal brand. And we talked about the relevant characteristics that define a personal brand. These individuals, in some cases, are top managers in big organizations, and they are investing time to create a thought leadership in specific areas, their brand territories. Often they're even investing in having a website, even in doing advertising to further promote their profiles. This is just how important and radical this personal branding practice has become. So why do an employee need a personal brand? This opens up opportunities, of course, of visibility internally and externally. There is a very interesting comment that Jim Stengel, the CMO, former CMO of Procter & Gamble, has made. He basically said that to convince people internally of the vision he was going to implement, he often talked to newspapers and magazines and was convincing internal people by actually communicating externally. And this is somehow something that I see very often happening. So a lot of managers are actually persuading their teams, internal stakeholders, by communicating externally. So by sharing their opinion, by sharing their thoughts with the larger audience. And so a personal brand mindset is very different than an employee mindset. An employee needs to match identity with the company culture, whereas think about a personal brand. You need to have a distinctive identity. Being unique, being distinct is actually what makes you stand out. As an employee, you seek long-term job security, whereas a personal brand seeks steady project flows, what we call employability. So the fact that you can have new projects coming up. You, as an employee, want to climb the corporate ladder linearly, and as a personal brand, you are open to alternative paths. So you create your career. So the career is self-driven. And so there are many, many differences, but I think in general, what is important for me to explain is being an employee means that everything that you are sharing needs to be somehow authorized by the company or aligned with what the company thinks and believes. Whereas as a personal brand, sharing is essential. It's the core of the existence of your brand.
It totally makes sense. It's also difficult if you've never shared before. To start sharing is a very daunting thing. What advice would you give to someone who, they've been working for a corporate job for the last 10 years and they think, okay, I like this, but I have all these other interests. I want to actually start, but I'm really intimidated by the idea of sharing something. What sort of advice do you give to people to encourage them to get started?
I think that bragging or appearing as someone that brags is one of the biggest blocker in content creation. I often suggest individuals to actually think that sharing is an act of generosity and you are in that position to give something back. You want to actually help others to develop as well. And so it should be seen as something very positive. What is considered bragging? It's basically, as we said before, self-promoting yourself to sell more, to sell your services, to sell the innovativeness of your company, which in a way doesn't give much added value to other individuals. But whenever it comes to connecting with like-minded individuals, helping them to develop, this is something that should be embraced as positive and very optimistic move. So what are the phases? Every individual has interesting aspect of daily life, of professional life. And the first step would be to actually tell the beautiful things you're doing, what you're learning in a way that you make others aware. Of course, not everyone will be interested. Some will be, others will not. And so it's very important to be positioned in a way that your brand delivers the value that you're seeking to deliver to the right individuals. And so this is, for me, first starting point. So you are, for example, doing interviews on magazines. And so, how can you repurpose this content in a way that makes sense with the context and with the group you are trying to reach? You don't have to produce anything new. It's just repurposing what you already have produced for other instances. Then, of course, you can get up to the most sophisticated level in which you are creating new content. So you are doing a podcast that requires you to be fully dedicated to it, that requires you persistence. And in fact, I believe I'm your 21st guest to this podcast. And I want to congratulate because you reached a very important milestone. 20 is actually where most of the people stop, and only 1% is actually passing the 20th podcast. So you are, with your persistence, competing only with 1% of other podcasters. There are similar cases of Twitch streamers or YouTubers where approximately only 10% is actually making a living out of content creation. And so the involvement and the commitment of creating a consistent flow of content for social channels, this requires clearly to step change and be completely conscious of the strategy that you have. So just to sum it up, I think that the first step is to share things just for the pleasure of doing it without the expectation of making a big impact initially. Why? Because this is very common. You are not shared much, and now you are starting, and you see the importance of personal brand. And then after you invested a couple of hours to craft a very nice post on LinkedIn, you receive just a couple of likes. And then you are discouraged, and you start to think, well, this is not worth my time. And you stop. And instead, as we said, perseverance is extremely important. To see results and to actually become visible to the algorithms of these platforms, you have to be active and produce content on a regular basis. Only after you will start to see results. And so, congratulations to you for having passed this important milestone.
Thanks. And that resonates with me 100%. And it's daunting and a bit sad when you, first 10 episodes, you release them. And this probably goes the same for LinkedIn posts. You release it and then no one's listening. And it's not a very nice feeling. But then if you flip it, that's a good thing, because at the very beginning, you're not very good at it anyway. So even if you screw up, no one's listening. So it also gives you the opportunity to actually get better at something as well with very little to no risk.
Definitely. So one important aspect of a mindset you have to develop is this ability to embrace failure and be open to receive feedbacks, which is common ground to have a growth mindset. So if you are afraid of exposing yourself because perhaps you're a perfectionist, your podcast is very much focusing on Switzerland. And now I've been living in Switzerland for the past 17 years. And especially when it comes to software development and technology, people tend to be so in control and don't accept failure in any shape or form. And I believe instead that in this environment, there is really limited risk if you are genuine in what you're doing. Of course, you might find people that judge you. You might find people that criticize a post and openly consider you not the thought leader you want to share to be. But actually, the benefit of being exposed are much higher than the potential problem resulting from it. And I just give you an example that I always like to give. So when social media became popular, executives at Lego were asked to go online with the account of the company and share something. Some of them just shared hello, Others went a little bit farther, but all of them were enthusiastic afterwards to see that others were contributing, were answering, were engaged in a conversation. And this is a bit the spirit of social media. So it's called social media because it's about social relationships, right? So it's so important that we are not just sharing content, but we are actively contributing to a community of like-minded people, a group of individuals that actually have the same interest and or passions. So having something unique, having something that connects to your value, your beliefs, very, very important.
I also have learned a lot through this. The things that I've put out in terms of content for me, the ones in which I predicted would be successful were not, and the ones I thought this is going to flop were successful. And like you said, you just don't know at the beginning. You just have to put things out into the universe and see what comes back. It'll surprise you.
Definitely, you're completely right. It takes time to actually develop authenticity in your writing, in sharing your thoughts. So those that do become authentic are the ones that will always have more opportunities, better opportunities. There is just an imposter syndrome process in there in which we don't feel adequate and we somehow tend to believe we cannot give enough value to others. Think about the AI trend right now. So everyone got expert of ChatGPT, and there are people studying AI since 20 years, and now the competition is just broader, and everyone got an expert in practically no time. But don't underestimate how good are people in actually capturing who really knows things, who really has something to add on a personal level, which is not just resharing news and fact that they've read somewhere else. So originality of the content, extremely important. If you are not original, you cannot be authentic in most cases. And so then there is no actual interest in following you, in learning from you.
How do you think cultural differences play into this? Self-promotion feels very American, whereas that doesn't seem to be the case in a lot of Europe, especially in Switzerland. Should people keep that in mind when promoting themselves? Should I think about the audience of who they're promoting to?
Definitely. So there are large differences. And I happen to teach also to medical doctors. So they are head of departments of very complicated disciplines, sometimes even hard to pronunciate. And as a doctor, you say, well, but I haven't studied to spend my time on social media sharing things. I actually want to help people out. And at the end of the day, what happens is that if you don't see this as strategically important to not only develop yourself, but also to develop your team, to recruit more talented individuals, then it's very difficult to find the enthusiasm and the consistency to keep pushing for it. But whenever I ask the question, so are you having time to recruit talented people? Yes, I have heard. Do you know somebody else that is actually in your field and is much better at doing that? Yes. Why? Because they have exposure, they have visibility, they already are deeply integrated in a community of individuals with the same interests, like-minded people. And so you realize that if you are a leader today, having a personal brand means that you can also develop your team much faster. Think about the university. So if you're a professor, the professor PhD relationship, a professor that is very active on social can more easily promote their PhDs, which means that they are more likely to actually find a placement gain opportunities. So of course, all this can be done offline. You don't need to do it on social media. You can probably just do it under the radar, but it's just the reach and the impact that you can achieve that today is required. Because if you are not speaking out, if you are not visible through the algorithms, you're basically non-existing. And there is, of course, a good side of it and a very bad side of it, but we have to be prepared and challenge ourselves to actually understand what limits us to expose more.
That's it for part 1 of my episode with Alex Murray, but be sure we are not done. Come back tomorrow for part 2, as there is still much more to unpack. Stay tuned.